going on, everybody? Welcome back to Knives of the Round Table. My name is Marco, and today we're going to be taking a look at the Curtis Knives F3. So Curtis Knives is kind of an oddball, at least in my opinion, in the knife world, because in a world that has defined, customs and mid-techs and production knives, this one has been called a mid-tech by some. But if you ask Dave Curtis, it's 100% a custom knife. He uses machines to make his knives, but he makes every single one of them himself. So that makes it a custom, at least in my opinion as well. So when he says it ain't no mid-tech, because that's what he says, I agree with him. These are made entirely by him. He does use machines, but every single knife is made by him. So the F3 has been around for a very, very long time. And let me give you a tour of the knife and I'll show you what we got. The F3 comes in three sizes. This is the medium size. There's a compact version and there's a large size version of this knife. The medium size version is the one that I like the most. It's right a 3 1/4 inch blade. So that's kind of my perfect blade size in my opinion. 3 1/2 I go because a lot of knives are at that length. But if I had my choice, 3 1/4 is where I would have all of my knives. He does the F3 in two different blade grinds. He does it in a compound grind, what you see here, and he does it in a Warncliffe. I believe he started making slicers, which is just like a, I don't know if it's a hollow grind, but it doesn't have the compound tip here. He does them out of CTS XHP. I don't think he notes it anywhere, but they're CTS XHP, which is a steel, that it's comparable to M390 or 20CV. Depends on who you ask. What you have here is so that's the name, F3. I like it a lot. I like the styling of the F3. You see here, let me see if I can give you a close-up of that. Yeah, there you go. F3 right there. And what he's done is he has this oversized pivot. I think he calls it the spot pivot. And what it does is the pivot also acts as the over travel stop. You do have a lock bar insert here, but the one that acts as the over travel stop is actually the pivot here. You have Curtis Knives logo on the back. You have a bent pocket clip with kind of his logo cut out of it, a small lanyard, and it is a titanium frame lock. There's many versions of this. There's one that is smooth. There's all kinds of anodized versions. There's even versions with damaged steel. You will see in my channel, I have a compact version that has damaged steel. You will see that in the future. Stay tuned. And this is kind of what you have in the closed position. This is what it looks like. So before I ramble too much on, let's get on with it. It's a very nice size knife. Let me give you some size comparisons. That's the pair 3. And pair 3 and pair 2. So it fits very nicely in between those two sizes. It has a blade length comparable to a pair 2, but it's a little bit shorter in length. Let me show you in thickness. It is a thicker boy. Okay, so just so you know. Now let me show you a comparison against the bug outs. That's what they look like closed. And that's what they look like open. So it fits a really nice size, in my opinion, a 3¼ inch blade length. So let me start by talking ergonomics here, and the ergonomics are good, but there's only one problem with this, and that is that the forward choil, it's a little bit oversized, at least in my opinion. So when you put your hand on it, it's not big enough for 2 fingers, but it's way too big for a single finger. So when you try to grip it in this position, you almost always end up being too far back over here. Now, he does do this portion right here, so your pinky kind of lands in this area over here, such that it kind of locks the knife in place. But the forward finger groove, it's far too pronounced in my opinion. Now, in front, when you choke forward, you kind of have the same problem. You do have a forward finger choil, but again, when you're choked here, this point kind of falls directly into that finger. Now, if you kind of spread out your hand like this, it's very comfortable in this position right here, but it's kind of pulled back. It's kind of pointing backward, so it's a little bit strange. The ergonomics are good, but I think this forward finger area right here, not finger choil, but this finger groove right here, is far too pronounced. I think this should be probably a little bit closer to this side over here. Now, let's talk action, and action is where this shines. I've always said, I don't know if you remember the old X-Men comic books, when Wolverine deploys his claws, there's a snicked sound that you get. That's the sound that the Curtis knife makes when it deploys. Snicked. It is so satisfying. It is so incredibly satisfying that it's that the acoustics are just outstanding. Now, the elephant in the room is the flipper tab, and I think he has reduced the size of the flipper tab in his later models. In some of the 20, I think he's making prototypes at the end of 2021, and starting production on 2022 with a smaller flipper tab. But it is a significant flipper tab. Okay, so if you don't like pocket pecking, when this sits in your pocket, this is a gigantic pocket pecker. Now, the result is that you get an insanely good action. The detent on this is just so incredibly smooth. Deployment is really nice. It takes a tiny bit of coaxing down, but for the most part, it's a smooth shut. But the deployment action on a Curtis knife is probably the best action I've ever felt on a knife. Deploying it feels better than a Shirogorov. It feels better than a Riot. It feels better than a Grimsmo. It feels better than a Hinderer. On deployment, I do think that overall the action on a Shirogorov is better, especially with the closing. But it's just deployment action. The deployment action on the Curtis F3 is just incredibly nice. It's incredibly nice. Now, when we're talking cutting on this knife, it's okay for shallow cuts. The hollow grind allows for a reasonably thin edge to about right here. But after that, it becomes fairly thick. If I show you the thickness, let me see if I can kind of compare. The thickness of the blade here. It's at its thickest, it's kind of the thickness of the Parrot 2. But the problem is that the Parrot 2 has a full flat grind from the top to the bottom, so it kind of comes down to a very thin edge here. The problem is that even on a same thickness of blade stock, you get to the thickest portion right about here, and so slicing through things, it doesn't slice quite as good as a para as a para two. Now it's not bad. It's not bad. It's still what I would consider a heavier duty knife rather than a slicer than a slicing knife. Because if you compare the thickness to a bug out, you can see there the bug out is going to be much slicier than what you get with the Curtis. Now, fit and finish is outstanding. Custom knives, because they're made by hand, there's a lot more attention to detail. There's a lot more attention paid to them, but at the same time, because they're handmade, because they are, they introduce the element of human error. Sometimes they have a little bit hits and misses, but that is not the case with a Curtis knife. In my experience with the Curtis knives that I have, these are just outstandingly made. There's no there's chamfering everywhere you would expect. The kind of heavy wash finish, the stone wash finish of the blade is just beautiful. It's just beautiful. The jimping, I like this jimping a lot, because when it's so close together like that, it gives you traction without hurting your hand, and that's really nice. I do like the oversized pivot. I think that's kind of unique. You get pivots that are that size compared to the spot pivot. I think that's very unique. I don't mind Nick Shabazz complains that you got his logo here, his logo here, his logo here, his logo over here, that he's got it everywhere. It doesn't bother me. I think it here it looks like a Phillips head, here it looks like a Phillips head, and over here and here I don't mind it as much. I think it looks good. The clip is it's a little bit I guess not deep, okay, or shallow. It goes to about right there. But overall, I think the quality of Curtis knives is, I think you can consider it probably a refined version of an XM18. Certainly, in the neighborhood of kind of what, probably not quite at the precision level of a Koenig, but approaching that. Okay, approaching that. I think the action on the Curtis is better than the action on a Koenig Arias, and I certainly think that aesthetics, the F3 is a much better looking knife than the Koenig Arias. The Koenig Arias, I think, is a better slicer. I think it cuts better. I think there's more precision in it, but certainly the aesthetics, and I like knives that don't look like they're gonna that they can go through a little bit of a rougher time without me having to baby it. And I think that's certainly the case with the Curtis F3. Now, airing of grievances, I do think that he could make the flipper tab a little bit smaller. I mean, if you look, it's already extending a lot past the frame here. I mean, it extends a good almost half inch, at least a quarter of an inch. So he could make it that a little bit smaller. I don't think that the action would be affected by it. So I'm curious to try one of his newer models and see see how the smaller flipper tab works. I do think that this configuration of the larger finger groove, if somebody has an explanation to that, leave me a comment. But as of right now, I think that this larger finger groove here could be reduced and giving you a larger area for the four fingers in the back here. I mean, that I wear large gloves, and you see my finger, you still have about a good half inch of space. So I would hope that he modifies the ergonomics on this a little bit. Guys, the F3 is one of my favorite knives. I'm gonna link to my top 10 knives, my knives of the round table, and this is certainly amongst the top 10 knives in my collection. The the action on this is phenomenal. I think it's worth at least getting one just to experience the action on deployment. The acoustics, the feeling of deployment is just second to none, and I would highly recommend it. In the secondary market, I got this for about, I want to say $600. So $600 for a custom knife is actually really really nice. Especially because he's done them for so long that you get a custom knife, but with kind of production consistency, because there is a benefit to production knives, right? Repetition leads to quality control, and he has exceedingly good quality, and he replicates his quality consistently. So I would highly recommend, if you ever wanted to get into a custom knife, this is definitely a good one to try out, because it's, even though it is a custom, it is bridging that gap between the, you know could be your entry level custom knife, if you will. I would highly recommend it. The F3, and the medium grind is just an outstanding size. Well, guys, hopefully you liked it. If you do, then hit me a like and subscribe. Do not get notified. Nobody likes to get emails. You know where to find me if you want to see my videos. Until I see you again, take care.